Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
Well, we're at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, Colorado at the Centennial Shop. And with us is Mark Kelbel, who's the head golf professional here at the Broadmoor, with a big event coming up, and that's one of the things being celebrated here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jenny. Thank you. Good to be with you all.
So tell us just a little bit about the U.S. Senior Open and the Centennial Shop and the Broadmoor's history here.
Well, good question, Jenny. The centerpiece of our centennial celebration will be the Senior Open next year. So we're 100 years old in 2018. So that's an amazing thing for any business, let alone a resort like we are. So that's what we're celebrating with the Senior Open coming, and it will be the centerpiece. But the whole year, we'll have monthly themes to that celebration and so on and so forth. And the Broadmoor, needless to say, is steeped in history and tradition, and all of it's going to be fun. Obviously, as a head golf professional here, the most fun part of the whole deal will be the Senior Open for us.
It sounds like so much fun, but you were having fun in Michigan at a place we all know and love, which is the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. So you really have a long history with Michigan golf before you got here.
I do. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Harbor Springs. My two brothers were pros. My brother Pete is now a pro at Walloon Lake. He's been there for 25, 30 years. My brother Ed sadly has passed, but he was a head golf professional in Michigan for many, many years. The last place there being the Emerald in St. John's there north of Lansing. And my dad was a pro there. He's pro at Walloon, Harbor Point, Bayview. That's where my grandfather was. So we have many, many, many golf ties to Michigan, and needless to say, lots and lots of friends and fond memories, and that's home for me. I love where I live now in Colorado, and my kids love it here. Great place to raise a family, but for me, Michigan is home and always will be.
We were talking earlier about one of your brothers being a great player. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Ed was a high school All-American golfer and an All-State golfer. Went on to play at Michigan State and still holds, I would dare say, probably more than a few course records in northern Michigan from his days as a pro. He was at Bayview and then Sheboygan, and then down at St. John's at the Emerald. So he was an outstanding player, as was my dad back in the day. So it was my dad was an easy caddy job. All he did was hand him a driver and an 8-iron and a putter. So and then onto the caddy cut. So that was just what we did.
And so your brother Pete is coaching and has had some success there?
Yeah, my brother Pete's had some great success. He's the head golf coach at Harbor Springs High School. His girls just won the state championship this year. And so Pete's had a great run there. I think they've won the regional 4 years in a row. And he's had some great success. I'm awfully proud of Pete. And he loves being the golf coach there. It's where we were all Rams and grew up there playing golf. So it's really special for our whole family, certainly especially for Pete.
It's such an amazing tradition. So tell us a little bit more about your dad and what kind of a mentor he was in terms of playing golf.
Well, we all worked for my dad. So we grew up in those days, as I tell people, if the child labor laws were enforced, my dad would have been in trouble. But we were with him a lot, and we certainly grew to be comfortable at the golf course and working there. And so through our dad, we were introduced to it, and then we became comfortable at it and proficient at it. And golf is one of those things, if you're at the course, it gets in your blood, and it's hard to find anything else to match that, however it makes you feel. And so we came by it honestly, and we all grew to love it, and we all followed in my dad's footsteps. So there must have been a real connection there.
Well, your dad had some interesting friends, and one of them was Tom Watson.
Yeah, Tom is a young man. He was a kid, really. He was at Walloon Lake, and my dad was the head pro there. And my dad would take Tom oftentimes to junior tournaments, things like that, and certainly work out in his game. Played with him some, became a very, very good friend of Tom's father, Ray Watson. And so Tom still has a strong connection to Northern Michigan and Walloon, and at Walloon now for my brother Pete, who's the pro there now, they have what they call the Watson Cup, and Tom is involved in that and writes a note to the competitors every year and so on and so forth. So that connection with Tom is very strong and continues to this day. And needless to say, we've all become big Tom Watson fans.
Well, it's always fun to have somebody to keep your eye on.
Yes, yes, it is. And he'll be here. He'll be here next year. Looking forward to seeing Tom, as we always are.
That'll be fun, too. And there was another guy you mentioned who was a GM, who was kind of a mentor.
Very, very important mentor to me. His name was Don Barrett, and he was there in the 70s when I was an assistant pro there, even into the early 80s when he was still there. So Mr. Barrett was one of those people that I just watched and emulated, and I just so admired the man with the way he handled people and the way he handled situations that it made me want to be like him. And I was with him an awful lot. And certainly we were oftentimes a tandem. We didn't have a big staff at Walloon in those days, so I spent a lot of time with him. So of all the people, aside from my father and my grandfather, I would certainly have to give Mr. Barrett a ton of credit for the golf pro I've become.
And you just mentioned your grandfather again. Tell us a little bit more about him, because he seems to have started this whole thing.
Well, he did. He grew up right across the street from Petoskey Bayview. And in those days, he became involved with the golf pros there at a very, very young age, to the point where he left home to go work for them in the winter down in Miami Beach. He had stops in Cincinnati and Philadelphia, believe it or not, when he was 12.
12?
12.
And he traveled by himself on a train, or?
Well, no, he was with them. But, you know, he left home at 12, and I remember asking my grandfather down when he was in Miami, I said, "You ever get homesick, Gramps?" And he'd say, "Only when the train whistle blows." He knew something was pulling out. But he was very interesting. He used to play golf with Gene Tunney, who was a heavyweight champion, and he played golf with Wild Bill Melhorn and Tony Martino. I think both of those gentlemen won the Open. But in those days in South Florida, that's who you could run into at various golf courses. So it was a relatively small golf community, and Gramps was fantastic at those stories, but certainly he deserves a lot of credit for our introduction to golf.
And he was where in Michigan during his golf career?
He was at Petoskey Bayview as a young man, and that's, as I say, he grew up right across the street from there.
What a nice spot.
Yes, good spot. I've been fortunate.
Well, congratulations on continuing a great family tradition. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Jenny.